Welcome everyone. My name is Dr. Stacey Camp and I am the director of the MSU Campus Archaeology program. I am your host tonight and I am here to welcome you to our first ever virtual Apparitions in Archaeology Haunted Tour and Facebook Live event. Tonight you're going to see a video that was put together by the MSU Alumni Office on our behalf. That is a new video that has never been shown before that documents the historic sites on campus that we have excavated at Michigan State University. We want to thank the MSU Paranormal Society, the MSU Alumni Office, and the MSU College of Social Sciences for helping us collaborate and put this event together. So now we will preview those videos, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. We look forward to hearing your questions after we show these videos.
Something terrifying is coming to campus. And it's right around the corner. Apparitions in Archaeology. Join us all October.
Welcome to the Apparitions in Archaeology Tour. This central area of campus has a long and storied history. We start our tour at the location of the first building on campus, College Hall. It was erected in 1856 and was the first structure in America that was dedicated to the instruction of scientific agriculture. College Hall was plagued with problems from the start, but it was not until the early 1900s, when the college began to transform the building into a student union, that the extent of poor construction became clear. On August 12, 1918, a portion of College Hall came crashing down as the band played the national anthem at a war trainees retreat. In October of 1918, the college decided to build an artillery garage on the foundations of College Hall. An alum was upset that such a structure stood where the original college building was located, and in 1928 paid for a memorial structure, which we now know as Beaumont Tower. The tower itself was constructed where the northeast corner of College Hall once stood. Some of the foundation walls for the original building still exist underneath the sidewalks. In the fall of 2009, the Campus Archaeology program tested areas north and south of Beaumont Tower. Once old sidewalks were removed, the Campus Archaeology program discovered the foundation of College Hall. In addition to the College Hall foundation, cinder pathways used by students in the earliest days of MSU were revealed in the test excavation units.
In 1927, East Lansing determined that a proper sewer system was needed, and the brook was diverted into a concrete pipe system. In the winter, when it snows, it is still possible to identify the underground brook as the warmth of the water melts the snow immediately above it. Archaeological work has revealed a number of important sites on MSU's historic campus. This is the location of an indigenous North American site that Cap dated to be around 5,000 to 3,500 years old. We found evidence of a substantial fire pit, as well as some distinctive tools used during this period. This is also an area we have found refuse or trash from the earliest campus occupation in the 19th century. A number of odd artifacts have been found, including the heels of someone's shoes and a cluster of human hair that appears to have been thrown out. Finally, when campus first began, it made its own bricks. This is the area where clay was gathered for the bricks to construct the first campus buildings. It is not entirely clear where the bricks were actually made.
Saints Rest was the first dormitory on campus. Constructed in 1857, it allowed students to live close to both their classes and their fellow classmates. The building was constructed to house 56 students, but with increasing enrollment over the years, eventually over 80 young men were crammed into its rooms. The lack of funds meant that the structural upkeep lagged behind, leaving the building in poor condition as the years went on. In the winter of 1876, while students were on break, the building burned down. The foundation was filled in with debris and its location marked only by a small stone plaque. In the summer of 2005, the Saints Rest Dormitory underwent extensive excavation as part of a field school conducted by the MSU Department of Anthropology. The extensive excavations uncovered several building walls and a myriad of artifacts, including hardware such as stoves, hinges, and doorknobs. During the excavation, archaeologists determined that the fire likely started in the basement, where construction tools were found burned in place, suggesting that an unattended lamp or heater may have been to blame for the blaze. Perhaps most importantly, this project prompted the establishment and creation of the Campus Archaeology program. In 2015, a privy associated with the Saints Rest Dormitory was discovered and excavated by the MSU Campus Archaeology program. Not only was this the bathroom for the students, but it also served as a dumping ground for illicit items, such as smoking pipes and alcohol bottles, that students wished to hide forever. But also discovered in this historic privy was the head of a porcelain doll, who came to be known as Mabel. Why someone living in Saints Rest, an all-male dormitory, was seeking to get rid of a doll remains a mystery.
Linton Hall is the oldest standing academic building on campus. It was erected in 1881 to serve as the college library and museum, and was used as the administration building in its later years. Lack of funds contributed to the library's beginnings on the third floor of College Hall. After a brief residence on the first floor of that building, the collection of over 1,200 volumes and newspapers was moved to the new Linton Hall. The second floor of Linton Hall was also home to the General Museum, which held the college's natural history collections. In 1925, the museum collections moved to the current MSU Museum building. Both the collections and the library stayed in the museum building until 1955, when the current library was built. After the departure of the collections, Linton Hall was transformed into the administration building and then various administrative and departmental offices. The 1900 fountain is an often overlooked artifact of the past, hidden between the bushes and trees of this area. It is a unique feature, not only due to its age in that it has two sides, one for humans and one for horses, but that it marks where the old road used to go through campus. Before cars and campus expansion, the road for this central area actually ran between the buildings, not along the outer sides as they do today. As travelers made their way through campus, they would stop here for a quick refreshment. It was placed between Linton Hall and Williams Hall, now located under the current MSU Museum. The building wasn't symmetrical. The original plan was to make both sides exactly the same, but because of a lack of resources, the north wing was never built. Building materials included mostly red sandstone, and the dorm stood in front of an artificial pond. In the late 1930s, the women moved out of the women's building and into a new women's dormitory, Williams Hall, and the name of the women's building was changed to Morrow Hall. It wasn't until 1896 when an official women's course was added into the curriculum. This caused the number of women attending the school to greatly increase, and it was clear that a building was needed for female housing. Construction on the women's building began in 1899 and was completed in 1900. The building was designed to sleep 120 women and a handful of faculty, including the dean, the head of the home economics department, her assistants, and the physical education instructor. Other rooms included a kitchen lab, dining rooms, a large recreation room, parlors, music rooms, bathrooms, and even a two-story gym. Since then, the building has been used for a number of different department offices and classrooms, most recently that of English, History, and Religious Studies. In 2010, the Board of Trustees decided that the internal wooden structure of Morrow Hall had incurred irreparable deterioration and was at the end of its useful life. The decision was made to demolish the building and in its place create a commemorative green space. Archaeological survey of this area was done prior to reconstruction, but no artifacts were recovered. All that is left is some of the original stone which was used to construct benches, and the original layout of the building, which has been marked with the concrete sidewalks below us.
This area was once known as Faculty Row. This was where the first faculty homes were built on campus. Building began in 1857, 2 years after the college was founded. Cowles House was one of the first 4 houses built. By 1885, there were 11 houses in total. Each building housed professors and their families. Some of the most famous residents of Faculty Row include President Abbott, Dr. Beale, and Dr. Kedzie. The houses were built to look like 19th century farmhouses, with big front porches, backyards, and even small horse barns. By 1970, all of these buildings had been repurposed, moved, or demolished. The only Faculty Row building still here today is Cal's House, which is the oldest standing structure on MSU's campus. Today, it serves as a special event center and meeting place for the president. This area is now known as North Neighborhood and is home to numerous undergraduate students. Construction on the dormitories began in the 1940s. Each dorm is named after a prominent woman from MSU's history, including Louise Campbell, Maud Gilchrist, Linda Landon, Mary Mayo, Sarah Williams, and Alida Yekeli. In 2008, Campus Archaeology excavated Faculty Row in the area between Landon and Campbell Halls. During these excavations, the Campus Archaeology program found early construction materials, including wood plumbing pipes and bricks made of clay sourced from the Red Cedar River and fired on campus. This shows that members of MAC's population relied on local materials to construct the earliest buildings.
In 1879, Beale got the college to build a botanical laboratory in the area near the Botanical Garden. The laboratory held state-of-the-art equipment, including compound microscopes. The first floor of the building was a laboratory lecture room, and the second floor was a museum with a large collection of plant specimens. This building burned down in 1890. Legend has it that some incompetent graduate students accidentally started a fire in the attic. Beale holds the world record for the longest continually monitored scientific study. In 1879, he buried 20 bottles of seeds mixed with sand at a secret location on campus. The goal of the experiment was to dig up one bottle every few years and test how many seeds sprouted. The next bottle is due to be excavated in 2020 and the last in 2100. Campus Archaeology excavated between West Circle Drive and the Beale Garden Gazebo in 2016. CAP found building foundations believed to be the Botanical Laboratory. Artifacts recovered include building materials, melted glass, and charcoal, probably associated with the 1890 fire. Beale Botanical Garden is the longest continually maintained university garden in the nation. It was established in 1873 by William Beale, MAC's first professor of botany. When he arrived at MAC, Beale turned much of this area of campus into a wild garden that he used as an outdoor laboratory. The garden contained over 700 species of flowering plants. The planting, labeling, and maintenance of the garden was done almost entirely by Beale's students. When Beale died in 1924, the Michigan State Board of Agriculture renamed the garden after him.
Welcome to the MSU Museum. Long ago, a very different building stood in this spot, Williams Hall, which was the second dormitory on campus. It was built in 1869, but, like nearby Saints Rest, it burned down in 1919 during winter break. Museum collections were originally housed in Linton Hall, just to the northeast of here. The current museum building was finished in 1925. Until 1994, the basement of the museum housed some of the archaeology offices and labs. Although limited archaeology has been done in the immediate vicinity of the museum, just to the west of Beaumont Tower, a small archaic campsite dating to between 3000 and 500 BC was discovered and excavated by Campus Archaeology in 2010 and 2011. It is the only intact pre-Columbian Native American site known on campus and continues a long tradition of research focusing on ancient Michigan sites by MSU archaeologists. Are there any ideas for new sites to be added to the haunted tour? Yes.
Yeah, so one of the sites we've actually been thinking about is the vet lab. We're thinking about that because there has been a lot of archaeological remains found there and some pretty spooky ones, including animal bones. One of the main considerations that we have is if it's within distance and accessible for our walking tour. And for that, we usually think of sites that are in the sacred space or the green area in the middle of old campus at MSU.
Great. One of the kind of follow-up questions we had to this was, and this I'm going to toss this to anyone on the panel. Do we know of any hauntings at the vet lab or current buildings near there?
I don't know anything about the vet lab, but I know plant soil sciences. I've had friends who have had experiences in that building, seeing people walk by and then having them just disappear. I don't think there really is a building on campus that could possibly not be haunted. I've heard many rumors in many different buildings, including dorms, cafeterias, but there's just the main ones that we have in our event that we have actual written documentation of possible hauntings.
Great, thank you. Trying to see if we're getting any questions from our attendees. I think Amber Clemens, who's a forensic anthropologist, one of our campus archaeologists, is going to join us in just a minute.
Hello, everyone. I'll just start feeding some questions that we previously had entered before the event. We gave people the opportunity to submit questions early, so I can just start giving you guys some, and as we get some coming in the Q&A, we'll give you those too. Okay, so let's see. One of our questions is, why does Campus Archaeology put on the tour, and how did it begin? And why does what does the Paranormal Society do?
I can do the why does Campus Archaeology put on the tour? One of the questions that we often get is, why do we do this when we focus on history and archaeology? And one of the reasons we do it is because we have people from all walks of life who come to this tour, people who are interested in the paranormal, people who are interested in the archaeology. And for those people who are interested in just the paranormal, I think sometimes we're able to draw them into the archaeology too by having this event. It started in 2013, and what's really neat about that is that graduate students who are part of the PhD program in anthropology here at Michigan State University were the ones that helped come up with this program. And we were really lucky that the MSU Paranormal Society, which is an undergraduate student group, wanted to help us out and collaborate. So I think it's also a fun collaboration with them. I'll pass the question to the Paranormal Society about why does the Paranormal Society do this event?
So one of the big reasons that we do this event for Paranormal Society is not only does the event attract people outside of campus wanting to know more about the archaeology and the hauntings on campus, it also draws in students who are interested in that sort of stuff as well and want to join our club. And the main thing we do with our club is we'll go on investigations, we'll go to different haunted locations around Michigan and search for ghosts, see if there's anything in those areas. But we also do many different things in our group activities. We'll discuss conspiracy theories and paranormal, just all the weird and supernatural things you can think about. And it's just a great way to make friends and have a fun time with each other.
Thank you all for answering that question. Our next question is, how do you choose the sites to excavate for CAP? Is it because they are haunted? And does CAP have any plans to dig in the future?
I can take part of this question. I've been here 3.5 years, and so far haven't experienced any hauntings on our archaeological sites. We choose sites based off of two things. So we Our goal, our mission is to protect and mitigate any heritage associated with Michigan State University. So there is construction that takes place on campus during the spring and some summer and sometimes even the fall. And we're notified about that construction through infrastructure planning and facilities, also known as IPF. And so when we find out that there's going to be construction on a site, we start doing a lot of background research on what may be below the ground so that we can potentially excavate it if we think that during construction they're going to encounter archaeological remains. So that motivates and drives a lot of our research. Even during construction, we're out on a project monitoring to make sure that they're not encountering any archaeological sites. And in fact, this past summer, they hit an archaeological site on Service Road, and we were working during the pandemic to monitor that and collect artifacts from that site, which we're excited to be sharing in the coming year on our social media. The other part of what we do is we run an undergraduate archaeological field school every other year. It's supposed to be next summer. We'll see if we can do that due to COVID. And that's something that we have more control over. So we try to choose sites that we know are unique to MSU's history. We talk about it as a group and try to figure out where we're interested in studying. We haven't used the paranormal to drive our research questions yet, but we're certainly interested in the history of places that people are very interested in on campus. I don't know if anyone else on the panel wants to add to that. They're welcome to. We have a lot of experienced campus archaeologists on our panel.
Yeah, I'll add something. So I've been on with campus archaeology for a while now, and a lot of the times we aren't actually excavating at sites. So every summer, IPF does a lot of construction with sidewalks, and so a large portion of our digs are actually testing all the sidewalks before they lay down new concrete. And so sometimes we do find sites that are right by those sidewalks. I think it was a couple years ago we found what turned out to be kind of they were building up the banks of the red cedar, and so we found some old they're building it up with trash. And so while we were doing some excavations right by some sidewalks, we found some old lantern bases and pieces of pipes that dated all the way back to the 1870s with patent dates on them. And so a lot of times, yeah, we aren't actually excavating sites. We're just doing stuff where construction is going on, whether that's a building or not a building, or even in an area that we've seen before.
Thanks for adding that, Jack.
Okay, up next, we have a question. Are there any reports of spooky happenings in Olds Hall, or are you aware of any interesting history?
Which hall was that again?
Olds Hall.
Olds Hall. I have not heard of anything happening in there. The main few that I have heard of have been wonders and I can't remember what the other one was, but it's one of the ones over in East Campus. I'm not over there often, so I can't remember the names of them. It may have been Holmes, but yeah, there's always the possibility.
And as far as the history of Olds Hall, we know that Olds Hall was built because the original engineering building in that spot burned down, like many of the other early buildings of campus history. And that was particularly devastating for MSU because it just kind of envisioned itself as a modern scientific university, and its real expensive building burned down. But luckily the president at the time, I believe Kedzie, had connections with Ariel Olds of the car manufacturer, and he put down $100,000 to build a new engineering building. So it has that kind of devastating history that a lot of the buildings here have. That, yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Next question. Have there been any reports of ghostly interference with cap excavation projects? With regard to Mary Maya's wood pipe, what factors led to MSU or MAC being able to source materials such as metal for construction?
I'll take the ghostly interference question. Not to my knowledge, although Jack's been here a while, so maybe he has some stories. I do not. I find the history of the site, some of them heavier than others. Right now, we are working on Spartan Village, which may be under construction next year. And the family that lived there, one of the families that lived there, had 2 children who passed away at 1 year old of diphtheria, and I believe the other one was around 10 years old, and they're both buried. Their headstones are in the cemetery, a cemetery in Okemos, and I think that's a sad story. So in some ways, the stories haunt me, but I haven't had people actually haunt me yet.
I think we have some knowledge about why they switched over the pipes from the wooden ones over in Faculty Row and later the area of the women's dorms. It's because they found out, even though the wooden pipes were supposed to be cheaper, they ended up harboring a lot of bacteria. And so after the increase in funding after the Second Morrill Act in 1890, the university was able to invest in better infrastructure, including cast iron piping, which was safer than the original wooden pipings. And if anyone has anything to add about that?
One kind of interesting fact about those wooden pipes is that though they were used nationwide, they were actually made in Bay City, Michigan, and during other construction projects in Detroit, Lansing, and I think in another small nearby town, they found those same Wyckoff wooden pipes that were really popular for a very brief amount of time until they realized that it was bad for your health. But kind of cool that it was a Michigan industry that kind of that blossomed out throughout the rest of the U.S. for a very brief period of time.
Okay. A question from our Q&A submissions. They're asking if, I guess if anything spooky has happened for the Human Ecology building, and if you guys have any history that you want to discuss with that building as well.
Does the MSU Paranormal Society have any spooky stories with that building?
I have not heard of anything spooky happening in that building. Not specifically that one per se.
I don't think we have anything to add unless someone on the panel from Campus Archaeology knows a little bit more about that particular building.
One thing we learned recently, because we're doing, over the past summer, Campus Archaeology excavated along Service Road, and we hit a trash dump from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and a little bit of stuff from the 60s. One of the most surprising and interesting things we found on that was a bunch of child-related artifacts, including like plates and shoes and other things. And so we've been researching the history of children on campus for a academic, what do you call them? Presentation. Thank you. And so we actually found out that the place of the Human Ecology Building now is where the original home economics building was in the 30s. It was built in 1920s. It was built in 1924, and in 1927 they opened up a small nursery there. And so that's one thing we do know about human ecology that I don't think we knew too many years ago. So we're always learning more about the history of MSU.
Awesome, thank you. Next question from our previously submitted questions will be, what is the coolest thing you found on campus?
Since I've been here for so long, I have a couple things. Back in 2016, we dug around at an old building that used to be there called Station Terrace, which was kind of smack dab in the middle of the Abbott Median. And we found some old leather shoes or some soles of shoes that were that kind of dated to the early 1900s. And for a brief time, that building that was there, Station Terrace, acted as bachelor faculty housing. And so we thought it could have been some professors' old shoes that they left in the basement after the building switched over. But probably the coolest thing that I think we found is these that I've helped excavate is a couple years ago, whenever they were doing some they're realigning the streets over kind of by Fee Hall and that section. The construction crews came across what turned out to be an almost perfectly preserved cow skeleton that it turned out to be like an old cow, like it was old in age, and so it wasn't like a beef cow or anything like that. So it was in the area where there were tons of farms. They they had a sick cow, and we had somebody confirmed that cut marks on the ribs were the result of a necropsy, which happens when an animal dies unexpectedly. So it's like, for humans, it's autopsy. For animals, it's necropsy. And so someone's beloved cow got sick and died, unfortunately. And so they performed a necropsy and then buried it out in that area, which I think at the time would have been just pasture. So that was really cool because it was an entire skeleton. And I wish we could have been able to excavate slower, but they were honest to get through it. So we pulled out and excavated an entire cow skeleton in about 6 hours, which was very, very quick. But that was one of the coolest things that I've personally found on campus.
Does anyone have a favorite artifact in the collection that they've seen or analyzed or explored in any way?
So I'm Emily, I'm new. I haven't excavated with CAP yet, but I'm working on our collections from a service road excavation from the summer. And one of the things that came out of this was a really creepy doll that's been like smashed, and it's made of plastic. And as I was doing the research on it, I discovered it's a celluloid doll. So it's a kind of doll that was made in the 1930s and 40s, but it's a highly flammable material, which is why it went out of use. So I just thought that was a pretty fun thing that children used to play with.
Yeah, I'm pretty new as well. So actually last weekend was my first excavation with Campus Archaeology, and I found my first thing, which was a small little whistle that was actually posted on our Instagram account, which was white and green, which is kind of interesting. It kind of shows there's spirit color, the Spartan colors have been around for a while. It's kind of a weird first thing to excavate.
I'll add mine. I have a lot of different things that I like in the collections, but the thing that comes to mind from the service road excavations, I know we're all mentioning it's because there's a lot of artifacts from there, but there's a really cute little bunny creamer that we found that's associated with children, and that I thought that was just kind of a unique object. It's ceramic and it's got rabbits all around it, and it is on our social media. I also love the frozen Charlotte doll. It's a little doll that has been in some of our video promos for this event. And there's a really neat nursery rhyme that goes with it. There's various iterations of it, but essentially it's that Charlotte was too vain to put a coat on when she was going to the ball, and she wanted to show off her dress. So she gets in a carriage with their suitor, and she's in a dress without a coat. And when they get to the ball, she's frozen. So that's kind of a morbid story, but they used to put these little frozen Charlotte dolls, and are made of porcelain. They're like one body essentially, and like birthday cakes and things that like were edible. So you'd find it in the middle of those things. So I kind of like that Victorian story, morbid story, especially during Halloween.
I have to say, I think the alleged possum's my favorite. So we have a mummified possum that stays in our lab, and we carry him around to all of our outreach. And I believe he was found in the wall, right, of one of the buildings.
Yeah, he was found in the walls of Cook Hall.
Yeah. While they were doing construction, I think 2 summers ago, yeah. And we have a second skull, so it may have been a family of them.
We do have a question in the chat. Was anything found during the excavation of the music building addition?
So I think that's over near Cowell's house, if I'm correct. So I remember, because I helped on some of the shovel test pits for those, and we really didn't find all that much there. We monitored construction, and they didn't really find anything, maybe a couple of bricks. We do know that around that area a while back that there used to be a racetrack that went all through Adams Field. And so I think we found, and I think it was some kind of like, they used, I don't know, some kind of gravel path. And so we think around there we hit the old gravel racetrack, or at least parts of it whenever they destroyed it. But surprisingly, even though it was like right, in the sacred space, it was surprisingly sparse in terms of artifacts.
Thank you, Jack. Our next previously submitted question is, which of the haunted tour stops has the most artifacts?
I'll take this one. So we would say Saints Rest, because that was the first big excavation associated with the MSU campus archaeology program, and was really the founding of our program. So there are lots and lots of artifacts that came from that excavation, and that's the first dormitory on campus. We were also able to recover artifacts from a privy associated with Saints Rest, and the privy was located under the kind of U-shaped driveway that's in front of MSU Museum. If you go to campus, and you need to wear a mask outdoors if you go to campus right now, you should find a signage for Saints Rest right next to the museum if you want to kind of explore that area. I don't know, are there haunted sites associated with Saints Rest? Those the Paranormal Society might know about?
I believe so. Let me look real quick. Yeah, so there was no reported deaths at the Saint Rest, so there isn't very many apparitions heard of or seen there. But there has been a figure seen wearing overalls and boots walking around that area. Other than that, that's as much as I know about the Saints Rest apparitions or hauntings.
And Mabel did come from the privy as well, the doll next to our screen here, who is not just a little creepy, but there have been previous campus archaeologists and campus archaeology fellows that have had less than average experiences with the doll, but mostly it's just a very creepy looking porcelain doll that came out of that area.
And if there are any people that just joined in, I want to remind you that you can ask us live questions by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom panel. So if you have something that's pressing, please do ask it. We're going through questions that people previously submitted to us leading up to this event.
So we did actually have a question about Mabel. They want to know why Mabel is called Mabel.
I can take this one. Mabel is nicknamed Mabel based on her hairstyle. So these dolls were really popularly produced in Germany, but basically this hairstyle was really popular. I think it was in the 1860s, and around the same time, Mabel was just a really popular name. So that's kind of the nickname we gave, I guess, previous campus archaeologists gave Mabel. So that's kind of our nickname, not her true name, but something that we use at least.
Okay, our next question. Are you planning to make any more digital events like the Haunted Tour Twine this year?
We always are looking forward to making our latest and new outreach events, and it looks like for the time being, a lot of those outreach events are going to be digital. So we haven't decided on our next one yet, and we haven't started planning for that. But we did create a lot of these events over the summer, and so we have multiple events and multiple digital humanities that are about campus and campus archaeology on our blog, including one on Faculty Row, on foodways, and a bunch of other ideas. And not only are those on our blog, but we also shared them with the Michigan State Historic Preservation Officer and the Michigan State Museum. And they will be hosting a Michigan Archaeology Day and using the links generated by us and many others. So you can find them on there as well. But if you're looking for other digital outreach, you can check out our blog. And Rian, you made one of those. You made a tour on the laboratories. If you want to talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I made basically it's a campus tour, so it kind of brings you through where all the original laboratories were on campus. So starting with College Hall, which is associated with Beaumont Tower on this tour. That was kind of where the first chemistry laboratory was placed before the first laboratory. The chemistry laboratory was then built on campus, followed by a couple others. So it kind of goes through a lot. Some of them what's called Laboratory Row are still on campus today, like Old Botany, the new Morrill Hall, Agriculture Building, Horticulture, I think they call Old Hort now. Those are all sort of associated when the campus was kind of booming and trying to create a lot more hands-on research. I know it's kind of written a lot in this twine, our Haunted Tour twine, but there really wasn't a lot of money. And so I think that they were kind of trying to produce a lot of research to sort of get ahead and sort of catch up with the curve of other universities that were better established, which is one of the reasons why, like, for example, we have such a large and long-standing botanical garden that was built attempt to try and like really take advantage of work, especially because it was a land grant and agricultural university. So a lot of that kind of is talked about in that tour. You kind of see where each one was. For example, the vet lab that we might add in futures on there as well. So kind of, we also have a blog series on it over the summer as well. So those are all available on our campus archaeology website.
Thanks, Rhiannon and Jeff. We have some questions from our live participants. The first question is, are there any truth about the Mary Mayo hauntings? And if so, what has been seen?
So I actually have some friends who have gone and done some investigations in Mary Mayo Hall. And what I have heard from them is that they have never had any paranormal experiences, and they actually disproved seeing Mary Mayo in the hall. Because sometimes people say that they'll see her pass through a window, and they went up there and there's a curtain that will move if a draft catches it sometimes. I have never personally had any experiences in Mary Mayo Hall, and as far as I know, I don't know anyone who has either. But there's always the possibility. You could just be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, I go to many haunted locations at different times of the year, and sometimes you'll have something happen, sometimes you won't. So it very well could be haunted, but I myself have never had anything happen there.
Awesome, thank you. All right, our next question is, it says, I've worked in HANA administration building for 26 years, and I've always heard about ghosts who rides the elevator and doors randomly open and close. Is there any truth to the story?
I have actually heard of this before, and I did have a friend who was in that building and did hear someone walk down the hall behind her and open the elevator doors, and when she turned around, there was nobody there. So there may be actual truth in this happening. Is there any documented proof? I don't think there is, but there is the possibility that there is a spirit haunting the Hannah Hall and using the elevators. Who knows?
Okay. We have another question from our live Q&A. What is the most active site on campus?
I have heard that the I'm trying to think of the building name. It's one of the auditoriums is actually is quite haunted. We have never actually gotten in there as a paranormal group to investigate it. They're usually not allowing people in at that point, or they're having construction done. So we unfortunately have not gotten to investigate it, but as far as I know, that is probably one of the most haunted buildings on campus. Yeah, which hopefully sometime in the future we'll be able to, and we'll have stories to be able to add. But as of right now, we can't get in there.
Thank you. So we'll go back to our previously submitted questions. Let's see. Do you have a favorite stop on the tour, and why is it your favorite?
I can start. So my favorite stop is the Beale Laboratory stop, mostly because of, I think the lab was a really cool Gothic architecture building, and the history of Beale Gardens is really cool, being kind of this pioneering botanical garden in the United States, and is still the oldest university botanical gardens. And in 2016, we also did some small excavations there and found some really confusing architecture of the basement and foundations. which made absolutely no sense. Some walls jutting off at 45-degree angles. And so it just kind of adds to the eeriness of the building, which if you actually look at a picture, it kind of looks like Herman Munster's mansion. So I just think that that's a really cool area with a lot of history. And I believe that Beale Gardens has some pretty creepy documented stuff happening. So that whole area I think is just really neat.
I really like Mary Mayo. I presented there in 2018, my first year at MSU and working for CAP, and I liked not only the history of the area, but that one was the most engaging and the one that we got the most questions at. Some people asked about the archaeology and where we'd excavated there and about the infrastructure, but a lot of people were interested in the hauntings, and it seemed to bring up a lot of stories for people and pretty spooky ones. So not that I necessarily believe in any of that, but it was a really fun site to be at because of the engagement and the connection people seem to have with Mary Mayo.
Yeah, I think even though we haven't done it in a while, I helped research for it. I kind of like the fountain, the 1900 fountain stop, just because it's really hidden and it's like hard to find. And I'm relatively new to campus, so it was like really cool checking it out for the first time. But the story behind it was that the class of 1900 created a rock, or donated like a rock to put there to commemorate their class. And their junior class broke it down and trashed it. And so they basically had to replace it, ended up replacing it with a fountain that was used for a lot of the horses and any travelers going around campus. So it just kind of sounds like a very typical class prank. So I just kind of feel like it has like a bit of interesting history to MSU.
Awesome. We have a question for the Paranormal Society. What kinds of tools do you use to explore hauntings on campus?
So whenever we do any investigations, we have a whole bunch of different tools that we use. Unfortunately, I don't have my tool bag with me. It's with the lead investigator of our group, and she's downstate. But of course, we use video cameras and voice recorders. But as far as actual ghost hunting equipment, we use an EMF or a K2 meter, which will recognize changes in the electromagnetic field. And the theory is that when there's a spirit or something trying to communicate, it will fluctuate the electromagnetic fields and it'll set off alarms on our gear. And that gives us a sign whether or not there could possibly be something there. But we always have to keep in mind that it will go off if there's something putting off those electrical fields, such as your phone, or there's some outlets or lights that will put them off. So we usually have our phones on airplane mode. We always check our surroundings to make sure there's no electrical anywhere nearby. Another thing that we use is a spirit box, which if you haven't seen any ghost hunting shows before, it's basically a radio transmitter that will go through different radio channels at a very fast pace, making what's called white noise. And the theory behind it is some sort of spirit can manipulate that white noise into words or possibly sentences to make sounds that may be able to come across as something logical to what we're saying. And whenever we're using this, we always make sure that it's not just sounding like it's sticking on one channel of a radio, or usually we'll try to make sure that if something comes through wasn't more than one syllable, because sometimes it does get stuck on one channel and it will just hear a blip of something, and it's usually that's probably not something coming through. But if it's multiple syllables in the same voice, then there's a possibility that there's something beyond what our comprehension is that there could be something unnatural and paranormal occurring. But those are our main tools. We also use what's called a little boo buddy. He's a stuffed bear who has temperature gauges in his paws and will also play different sounds of a child's voice, like asking, hey, do you want to play with me? You can touch me. And if temperature changes when some around his paws, they'll change lights and he'll say, hey, are you making it hotter or colder? So it's a great tool to use. We'll always have some sort of temperature gauge, like a temperature gun, to be able to see if there's an actual change or fluctuation in temperature. So we have a wide variety of different things that we use. Those are the main ones. Of course, we'll have other people come and they'll bring stuff like laser pointers, full spectrum cameras. There's many different tools, but those are the main ones we use in the club.
Okay, we have sort of a follow-up question in our Q&A. Where have you been when you've had something come through on the spirit box?
For on campus or like in any circumstance? Because whenever I haven't used the spirit box when I've been on campus investigations, so I haven't really had anything come through. But usually when you're using the spirit box, it's good to let it go through a couple cycles to see what the baseline is, to see if you do get interference with it, because it is a very common occurrence depending on where you are. So if you do get an interference, quite often we don't usually use it. But when there's no interference and we haven't had any activity on it, it makes it that much more interesting if something does occur and there isn't like anything to interfere with those radio frequencies.
Thank you. So we'll ask one more question off of our previously submitted questions. Are there any plans to go back to any of the sites on the tour and excavate more? And to add to that, does the Paranormal Society have any plans to go back and explore any other sites on campus?
I'll take the archaeology one. We don't have any plans right now to return to any of the sites. One of the reasons is because often buildings are built on those sites, so a lot of things are encountered as construction is happening, like we talked about with Service Road this past summer. And the example of the cow skeleton is we don't find things until they dig pretty deep under the ground, because they put a lot of dirt historically on campus to fill up the landscape and fill certain landscapes so that it's level. But we always monitor construction, and we always try to do at least what we call surface survey or pedestrian survey, which is when we walk across a landscape that's slated for construction, look for artifacts, and if it's safe to do so, meaning there's no utilities on the landscape, or at least not near where we're going to be digging, we'll do shovel testing, which means we go across the landscape, and depending on the size of the landscape and what we think we might encounter, we might walk every 5 meters across the landscape and put holes in the ground to see what we encounter. And then again, we monitor as construction is happening to see if they're encountering any archaeological sites or artifacts. But because there's been so much construction on those sites that are on our tour, and we kind of know what's there, we're not planning on digging at those sites. I think there are some areas of the sacred space on campus that we haven't explored in significant depth, but we have done a lot of survey and shovel testing. So maybe some of the historic areas in the sacred space in the future, but none of the specific ones that we're talking about for tonight, just because we already have explored them archaeologically.
As for Paranormal Society, if we're going to be doing any investigations in the future on campus, we usually do investigations on campus every year. We usually do them right before Halloween, so we have stuff to bring to the Apparitions and Archaeology haunted tour. But unfortunately, with COVID, we don't have meetings on campus and we aren't meeting in person. So hopefully in the future we will be continuing to do investigations on campus, and maybe we'll have some more stuff next time we have this possibly virtual tour or in person again.
Great. So I don't see any more questions from our attendees. I wanted to thank our attendees for putting up with our technical difficulties. This is our first virtual event, so hopefully we'll get it right the next time, and we're really excited that you attended. If you have additional questions, you can find us on our social media. You can message us. You can also email us. And I know we have social media for the MSU Paranormal Society as well as for Campus Archaeology, so feel free to get in touch with us. Also, if you could, please do the survey that we sent out. It's just for our information to improve our events in the future and get some feedback from you, so we appreciate you taking the time tonight to do that. I want to thank the MSU Alumni Office for hosting this event and for doing a lot of the promotional videos and promotional information for this event. I want to thank the College of Social Sciences for doing promotional videos and promoting the event. I want to thank the MSU Paranormal Society for showing up tonight amid, I'm sure, a very hectic fall semester with lots of classes. So thank you so much for your work. We always appreciate partnering with you and learning new things about our campus's paranormal history. And then finally, I want to thank our Campus Archaeology crew who put a lot of time and effort into making the tour happen, the virtual tour this summer and fall, and for showing up tonight and answering questions. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you to Devontae for helping us with all these technical issues and getting this video live. Have a wonderful and safe Halloween.